In a referendum held last June 23, 52% of British voters opted to leave the European Union. Let's get a better understanding of this so-called Brexit as we speak one-on-one with British Ambassador Asif Ahmad. Then let's take a look at what has happened to the $81 million bank heist in a roundtable discussion led by Bangladesh Ambassador John Gomez. We also join the celebration of Bastille Day and the 70 years of friendship between France and the Philippines. Good evening. I'm Veronica Baloy-Jimenez, and this is Bridging Borders. The exit of Britain from the European Union has created a lot of questions about the future of the people affected by it. We will be discussing Brexit, and we have with us the British Ambassador, His Excellency Asif Ahmad. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes. Can you give us a brief background of your career before you came to the Philippines?
Sure. I first came to the Philippines 14 years ago when I was Director for Trade and Investment in the Foreign Office, and then really caught the Philippine bug, and my desire was to find a way one day to work here. So I was lucky that after I finished being ambassador in Thailand, I arrived here. But before that, I was a banker for the best part of 18 years, doing a lot of things, general banking like you would experience yourself as a customer here, but also international corporate finance, private banking. At that time, I set up a wealth management subsidiary of our bank here in this region, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and elsewhere around the world. So I've had some Asian exposure. But as a kid, I lived in China and Japan too. So somewhere along the way, it was always my destiny that the bulk of my career would end up here in this vibrant region.
And you've been here in the Philippines for 3 years?
3 years now, yes, and I have hopefully one more year to go.
Yes. And how do you find your term here in the Philippines?
You know, my arrival here was preceded by a decision that our government made, which was to define up-and-coming countries, some 40-odd countries around the world, which we regarded as emerging powers. And the Philippines was one of them, alongside countries like Mexico, Indonesia, and others. And what do we mean by that? We meant that if you take a 30-year view, then this country was going to be economically strong and powerful, that people had spending patterns and something to offer the world in terms of their own talent pool, contribute to research, development of science, and not just be a country where you just simply buy our goods and services, which we're of course very delighted to. But it also means having a voice in global affairs around the world. So, you know, your recently appointed representative, the veteran Mrs. Manalo, as to represent the interests of women in the UN, for example, or the peacekeeping operations that the Philippines has mounted from time to time, the huge contribution the Philippines makes through its labor force abroad. You know, these are things that we've taken into account, and our, if you like, political and economic bet is that the Philippines will be a country to really make its mark going into the next 3 decades. As a result of that, my embassy is now 3 times bigger in terms of its early beginnings. You know, when you go back, maybe when I first arrived here 14 years ago, in my time here it's doubled in size.
Why is that?
Well, 2 reasons. One is that we're kept busy in the Philippines. There's so much to do: politics, economics, trade flows to follow. We have 17,000 British nationals who live in this country, and they need our help from time to time, or at least a place to go to for information and advice. Travelers from the Philippines going out to the UK, some 3 years ago was about 25,000, and is now touching 35, so another big jump there. So a whole host of reasons why, but the other one is an interesting one, which is that we were looking at a place around the world where we could do some of our back office functions in the same way that BPOs and other data processing centers have been doing, and we chose the Philippines. So I've got a team of people who are serving half of the world, our embassy network here. We do all the recruitment of local staff in the region, in Asia Pacific, from Manila. All the CVs come here, we sift them, and then we go to the embassies in Beijing or Jakarta and say, here's a short list of 5. And that's the real benefit of operating in a country where English is widely spoken. There's a nice talent pool. The office building that we have is state of the art. And it's a good place to work, and we've achieved a lot.
Well, we speak English, most Filipinos, but we're impressed by your being able to speak Tagalog or Filipino. How did you learn Filipino?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, firstly, it was the then Foreign Secretary. He came up with a wish that where English is not just the language that is spoken, that a certain number of embassy staff should learn the language. And in my case, they decided the ambassador alone should have that investment. So originally I was supposed to have 12 months of Filipino lessons, but it was ultimately shortened to 5. But I had very, very good teacher. She's a long-term resident from the Philippines, living in London. But it was intensive. It was 5 hours, 5 times a day for 5 months.
Do you speak other languages?
Yes, I do. I was born with my mother tongue, which is Bengali, and English, of course, because in London, that's where I was born. That was the natural language. That's, French at school, countries I've lived in. So I ended up in total with 7 languages. Unkind people say I speak all 7 languages badly.
So magaling ka mag-Tagalog?
Oh, konti lang. Pero hindi para sa mga trabaho kasi delikado ang mga issue.
Pero nakakaintindi ka ng mabuti?
Mga 90%.
90%.
90% ng sona.
No, that is an advantage for you. We were surprised too that the president ad-libbed a lot. We will pause for a break. Bridging Borders will be back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Bridging Borders, and we're still with the British Ambassador to the Philippines, Ambassador Asif. The world was shocked when Britain decided to go for the Brexit. Many people didn't expect that. So a lot of uncertainty, enveloped the people involved. In Britain, Europeans, and even other countries, because they have a lot of nationalities going inside Britain and working there. What is the mood right now? What is happening right now in this aftermath of the vote?
Yeah, I mean, when Prime Minister Cameron came into office just only a year or so ago, he made that pledge that he would go into the European Union, to the member states, negotiate a new set of terms, and then put that issue to the people of the United Kingdom. On this basis, are you willing to continue to remain in the EU or to find a way out? Now, the recommendation that he made, and indeed the recommendation of the government, was that we should remain. But the thing about democracy is that people ultimately have their final say. And it doesn't matter whether the margin in the UK is 1 vote or 1 million. Our system is first past the post for a member of parliament, for a local council office holder, and Brexit is no different. People can argue whether 40% is good enough or 54% is good enough, either side of the argument, but people have had their say. The new Prime Minister, Theresa May, has made it very, very clear that the issue is not whether we exit the European Union, but when, and on what terms, and that's what everybody's really working on now.
How do you think this will affect your economy?
Well, longer term, I think you've got to look at the underlying strengths of the United Kingdom's economy. We are already a member of the G7, the 5th largest economy in the world, and last year we were the fastest growing G7 country. So there's something fundamentally strong about the UK. Also, if you go back to the traumas of 2008-9, when the global financial system was under pressure, at that time there was a view taken by the UK that our public sector, the amount of our economy dependent on the state, had to shrink. And the decision was difficult. 500,000 of my colleagues in the civil service were removed from the public sector altogether. They lost their jobs. I was talking about our embassy here growing, but that was because we shrunk our embassies elsewhere. It wasn't some sort of largesse on the part of our Prime Minister. So we took the early medicine of getting our economy in order, which is why we came out of the recession quicker, and we're now recording growth. Our talent pool of labor hasn't disappeared. Our industry hasn't disappeared. We make more cars today than we've ever done in our entire history. And of course, London as a financial centre is international and is the world's biggest in terms of market share. Which is why, for example, between 15 to 20% of Philippine listed shares are held in UK portfolios. So we are a big global player. And the other thing worth remembering is that it's not that suddenly on the day, whenever it happens, that we leave the EU, that everything comes to a standing still. Because it's a two-way thing. Something like half of our exports go to the European Union countries, and in reverse, we buy more from the rest of the EU than the other way around. They invest more in the UK. The UK is the second world favorite destination for inward investment. The US is number one, but that's fine. So if you look at it that way, it's not just about what's going to happen to the UK. It's in the interest of everybody to make this system